Some of you are familiar with the name Paul Revere. One reason we've heard about him when we've been talking about the Sons of Liberty, protesting the taxes that the Parliament passed on the colonies. He was a very vocal Son of Liberty, and he was also the man who made the engraving of the picture of the Boston Massacre that we talked about. And I have, just as a reminder, that picture here for you, okay? Of course, as we learned about that picture of the Boston Massacre, is that wasn't exactly what happened. Paul Revere kind of made that picture to make the British look really guilty so the colonists would be mad at him, because that was part of the Sons of Liberty's job, to get the colonists upset at the British government and protest against them. A lot of people are familiar with Paul Revere because of a very famous poem, and I'm going to read part of that poem to you now. Your parents probably know some of the stuff they know about Paul Revere because of this poem. It was a poem written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in 1860 and published in 1861. And it goes like this. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. One if by land and two if by sea, and on the opposite shore will I be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and arm. Okay, so Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem made Paul Revere really famous, but his poem was written almost 100 years after Paul Revere's famous ride, and the poem got some things wrong because Longfellow took what's kind of called poetic license, and he changed some things up to kind of make his story sound better, which means that lots of Americans grew up not really knowing the true story of Paul Revere. They might have pictured him like in this picture, okay, running through the streets as people come out of their house shouting, and your parents or your grandparents may have learned that he shouted, "The British are coming, the British are coming." He did ride out of Boston to warn people that the soldiers were coming. And today we're going to learn a little bit about what he did and why he did it. So here's some background to help you on your way today. Number one, we know that the colonists were angry at the king and parliament, and we know that after the Boston Tea Party, the king and the parliament passed the Intolerable Acts to punish the colonists in Boston, and they didn't like that, obviously. And that we also know now that after the Intolerable Acts, we had people from 12 colonies meet in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to discuss what they were going to do about the problem. Okay? So they decided it was wrong. They were going to help out Boston, and they sent the king a letter. That'll show him. Okay? Explaining what they were upset about. So we know all that. In the meantime, people in the Boston area and the towns surrounding Boston are preparing for the worst. So the Continental Congress may be sending a letter to the king, but the citizens in and around Boston are collecting weapons, gunpowder, guns, things like that. And what's going to happen in April of 1775 is that General Gage, who is now in charge of Boston, he's now the governor of Massachusetts, so they have a military man running Massachusetts, decides that he is going to send soldiers out to find and to take this stockpile of weapons that they have in Concord, and to arrest a couple of troublemaking patriot leaders by the name of Samuel Adams and John Hancock. So what ends up happening is that Paul Revere is one of many riders who are sent out to warn people that the soldiers, the redcoats, will be coming and to take the weapons and that they need to move them. Now, some of the things that people have learned wrong because of the poem, it's probably unlikely that he would have gone around yelling the British are coming. Number one, he wouldn't have been yelling because they want to get out and warn people. So it was almost like a network. Like, I'm going to go here, you're going to go here, and another rider is going to go here and go there. And there's tons of riders spreading out to warn people. It's not just Paul Revere like the poem makes it sound. The other thing is, it probably wouldn't be a great idea for him to go screaming at the top of his lungs as he's riding through the towns in the middle of the night, because he's kind of got to do this on the down low. It's kind of secret. Otherwise, the British are going to stop him from telling everybody. Probably unlikely he was yelling the British are coming, because they were all British colonists, so they were all British. He might have been he might have been telling people the regulars were coming, the army was coming, the soldiers were coming. Maybe he said the British are coming, but we got to remember the colonists are all British still. So yelling the British coming doesn't make too much sense. What else? He wasn't the only one. Okay, and it says he was waiting for the lanterns in the church, but actually, Paul Revere was the one who put the lanterns in the church. One if by land, two if by sea. They were a signal to let other Sons of Liberties know what was going on, that the soldiers were going to be leaving Boston. And he put the lanterns in the church tower way up high so everybody could see them, in case he got stopped by the soldiers and wasn't able to get out of the city of Boston to warn people. He did make it out of Boston, but he was not the only one. And he did make it to Lexington. It should sound like a pretty familiar place. Some big stuff's going to happen to Lexington very shortly after Paul Revere's ride. So he rides to Lexington. He warns Hancock and Samuel Adams, that the soldiers are going to be coming, and part of what they're going to do is supposed to be to find them and arrest them. And so they take all their important papers and they hide all this stuff that could get them in trouble, and they take off. So they do leave. As Revere is out, he meets up with William Dawes and also with Samuel Prescott. Samuel Prescott, one of my favorite parts of the story, from what I heard from interpreters at the state park in Concord, National Park, is that Samuel Prescott was out late at night and kind of ran into Revere and Dawes, who were going out to warn people. And he said, "Hey, you guys want some help?" And sure. So he kind of met up with them, and he went out too. And the funny thing is the only reason he was out at night is because he was courting a lady. Modern terms, he was visiting his girlfriend. Okay, so he's coming home from visiting his girlfriend, meets up with Paul Revere and William Dawes at this point, and they set out. They run into a group of British soldiers. Revere gets captured. He never finishes his famous midnight ride. William Dawes escapes and Samuel Prescott escapes. And Samuel Prescott is the one who makes it all the way to Concord to warn them that the soldiers are coming, so that they can hide and move their weapons. Paul Revere never makes it. He gets arrested, and they hold him all night, basically. And they take his horse. The funny part about the horse is the horse wasn't even Paul Revere's horse. He borrowed somebody's horse, and the soldiers took it. It's kind of like them confiscating your car, but it wasn't really your car. It was your friend's car. Explain that one when you get home. Okay? But Paul Revere was an important messenger, and he delivered lots of important messages back and forth to members of the Sons of Liberty. And the message that he sends in April of 1775, that General Gage and the soldiers are going to be coming out of Boston, is the message that is going to start the events that are going to start the actual fighting of the Revolutionary War. So I hope you learn a little bit something about Paul Revere today. You have a little fun learning it. And we'll talk more about what happens after his famous ride tomorrow.